I'm Sydney with BookGame.com and I'm bringing you a Fragment Friday. And the book is Iron Queen. It's the third in the Iron King series. And the fragment starts on page 35. Ash's voice was soft as he turned away. Let's go. We continued down the several more aisles, stone mausoleums flanking us. I peered anxiously between the tombs, wary of bogies and gallery beggars, and anything else that might jump out at me. I searched for the mysterious grim, my creeped-out brain imagining werewolves and zombie dogs and scythe-toting skeletons following us down the streets. Finally, we came to a small stone mausoleum with an ancient cross perched on the roof and a simple wooden door. Nothing fancy or extravagant. The tiny plaque on the wall was so faded it was impossible to read. I would have walked right past it if Ash hadn't stopped us. "Whose tomb is this?" I asked, hanging back from the door as if it would creak open to reveal its grisly contents. Ash walked up to the crumbling granite steps and put a hand against the wood. "An older couple, no one important," he replied, running his fingers down the faded surface as if he could sense what was on the other side. Narrowing his eyes, he glanced back at me. "Megan, get up here now." I cringed. "We're going inside?" "Once I open the door, the Grim will know we're here. Its duty is to guard the cemetery and the remains of those in it. So it's not going to be happy about us disturbing the dead. You don't want to be out here alone when it comes. Trust me." Heart pounding, I scurried over the steps and pressed close to his back, peering out over the graveyard. "What is this thing anyway?" I asked. "Can't you just slice your way through it or turn us invisible for that matter?" "It's not that easy," Ash explained patiently. "Church Grims are immune to magic and glamour. They see right through it. And even if you do kill one, it doesn't die. To destroy a Grim, you have to dig up and burn its real body, and we don't have the time." He turned back to the door, murmured a quiet word, and pushed it open. A blast of hot air wafted through the open crypt, along with the musty scent of dust and mold and decay. I gagged and pressed my face into Ash's shoulder as we eased inside. Shutting the door behind us, the tiny room was like an oven. I was almost instantly covered in sweat. I pressed my sleeve to my mouth, gasping in the fabric. I tried not to be sick at the scene in the middle of the floor. One raised stone table lay two skeletons side by side. The room was so small that there was barely enough room to skirt around the edges of the table, so the bodies were quite close. Too close, in my opinion. The bones were yellowed with age and nothing clung to them. No skin, hair, or flesh. So they must have been here a while. I noticed the skin was holding hands. The skeletons were holding hands. Long, bony fingers wrapped around each other in a gruesome parody of affection. On one knobby, naked digit, a tarnished ring glinted in the shadows. Curiosity battled revulsion. And I looked at Ash, who was staring at the couple with a grave expression on his face. "Who are they?" I whispered quietly through my sleeve. Ash hesitated and then took a quiet breath. "There is a story," he began in a solemn tone, "about a talented saxophone player who went to Mardi Gras one night and caught the eye of a fairy queen. And the queen bid him to come to her because he was young and handsome and charming, and his music could set one's soul on fire. But the sax player refused, because he already had a wife, and his love for her was greater than even the beauty of the fairy queen. And so angry that he spurned her, the queen took him away, and held him in the never-never for many long days, forcing him to entertain her. But no matter what the young man saw in fairy, and no matter how the queen tried to make him her own, even when he forgot his own name, he could not forget his wife back in the mortal world." Watching Ash's face in the shadows and his eyes as he spoke, I got the feeling this was not a story he'd heard somewhere. This was a tale he'd watched unfold before him. He knew of the token and where to find it because he remembered the sax player from the Queen's court, another mortal caught up in the cruelty of Fae. Time passed, Ash went on, and the Queen finally released him because it amused her to do so. And when the young man, his head filled with memories of both real and imagined, returned to his beloved wife, he found her aged 60 years, while he had not changed a day since he vanished from the mortal world. She still wore his ring and had not taken another husband or suitor, for she always believed that he would return. Ash paused, and I used my free hand to wipe my eyes. The skeletons didn't seem so creepy now, lying motionless on the table. At least I could look at them without my stomach churning. What happened after that? I whispered, glancing at Ash, hopefully pleading for this fairy tale to have a happy ending. Or at least a non-horrible one. I should have known better by now. Ash shook his head slightly. Neighbors found them days later lying in a bed, a young man and a shrunken old woman, their fingers intertwined in an unbreakable grip, and their faces turned toward one another. The blood from their wrists had already dried on the sheets. I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked at the skeletons again, fingers interlocked in death as they had been in life, and I wished that, for once, fairy tales, real fairy tales, not Disney fairy tales, would have a happy ending. I wonder what my ending will be. The thought came out of nowhere, making me frown. I looked at Ash over the table, his silver gaze met mine, and I felt my heart swell in my chest. I was in a fairy tale, wasn't I? I was playing the part in the story. The human girl who had fallen in love with a fairy prince. Stories like that rarely ended well. Even if I did finish this thing with a false king, even if I do go back with my family and live out a normal life, where would Ash fit in then? I was human, he was immortal, soulless fairy. What kind of future did we have together? I would eventually grow old and die. Ash would live on forever. Or at least until the mortal world would become too much for him and he simply ceased to exist. I closed my eyes, my heart aching with a bitter truth. He didn't belong here, in the mortal world. He belonged in fairy, with the other creatures of myth and nightmare and imagination. Ash was a beautiful, impossible dream, a fairy tale, and I, despite my father's blood, was still human.